So my name's Chris Aitchison. I'm a little bit nervous tonight. Haven't been up before. Long time lurker, first time speaker. Basically, Mike Morris at my work pinged me the other day and said, they need a lightning talk at Roro. I'm like, oh, yeah. Look, I've got a talk in me, but I want to rehearse it a fair bit before I do it. And I went and put a PR up like Michael showed before in the GitHub repo. And I'm like, yeah, I've got a great one on analytics. Great. And I'm like, don't worry about it, Mike. I put a talk in. I'm all good. I'm doing my bit. He's like, no, for Wednesday. I'm like, oh, shit. He's like, just talk about what you do every day. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm the engineering lead of the team that builds up at Ferocia. So for those who don't know, and this was supposed to be a cool little animative thing, but my keynote skills are progressing. We build a banking platform that's basically all the things you'd expect from a bank. You know, you expect that it tells you when you spend your money or when someone takes the money out for a direct debit, or you'd expect it to be able to do Apple Pay, you know, as soon as you sign up, things like that. So we've got a team of about probably 15 engineers that work on Up. Ferocia's around just over 30 people. And I guess this talks about what I've learned as I've sort of worked in bigger teams, which is sometimes it's good to know how to code, but a champion team is always going to beat a team of champions. So how you interact with your colleagues at work is going to directly affect like the success of your company and also everyone's happiness. So yeah, these are some tips about. Oh. So one thing I've learnt as I've got a bit older is that everyone usually comes in with good intentions. And sometimes you might be having an interaction where it just doesn't feel like this person has good intentions, but really the thing I've learned is that you know about 10% of what's going on in someone's life, probably 10% of what's going on in their day. So when someone seems to be being difficult, they might be having problems at home, they might have a sick kid, they might have insomnia, they might be having relationship problems, they might have had a family member die lately, anything. And usually what that issue is no one's business. So what I've found is if you find yourself getting frustrated, maybe just imagine that there is something else going on. And even if there's not, it doesn't really matter. It's actually quite a calming thing to just assume there is. And sometimes when you get to know people better and you learn more about them, you'll realise that interactions you had a long time ago actually were biased by something that might have been happening. I mean, I remember getting deep into a debate on the merits of replacing Tech A with Tech B with a colleague a while ago, and I was fascinated how it didn't seem to be something I could convince with logic and reason. And then, you know, a while later I learned that there was a legit sort of neurological reason that might have been behind it, you know, like I just had no idea. And so that sort of context, I guess, helps you have a bit more calm in your day, which is always good for the team. Another thing I've learned is that no matter how much you want to do TCR or it's not going to be the end of the world if the team doesn't go with it. So it's one of those things where some things aren't life or death. If someone wants to use Vim or Emacs or use Colmac or Dvorak or anything like that, I've learned that it just doesn't matter. Everyone's an individual and people like to feel that they have autonomy about how they do their job. So unless you're doing that type of pair program where you sort of have to align a few things, I mean, that's probably a different scenario. Most differences in opinion don't matter. Some do, like the team has to have alignment on, you know, what technologies you're going with or certain patterns or workflows, etc. But I think the trick is to approach them or present them to the team as a shared problem. So here's a problem we have, and here's my ideas for fixing it. Does anyone else have any ideas, and how do we fix it? And if you can't sort of describe what you're trying to promote as a problem or a solution to a problem, it might be a thing where you just need to rethink how important it really is. I was the guy that liked CoffeeScript, by the way, and yeah, I was sad as it died in popularity, and everyone told me it was no good. And even though they were all wrong, I kept it to myself. So I found that the easiest team members to work with are the ones that ask a lot of questions. So as someone who has to sort of keep abreast of what everyone's working on, it's easy when I know that someone's prone to ask questions if they don't know something, because then I don't have to worry about, do they know everything they need to know? If someone doesn't have a tendency to ask questions, then I'm always wondering, ooh, do I need to go and ask them, or I need to just go and work out if they know all the stuff that they need to know. And that causes me to potentially bother them more than I have to, or maybe they'll get a feeling that they're sort of getting asked what's going on too many times, and they feel like they don't have as much autonomy. So showing that you're happy to ask questions is a great thing to sort of make sure your team's aware of, because that they can sort of rest a little bit easier knowing that if you've got any doubts, you'll bring them up. And also, I guess if you're in the business of building to a specification or taking requirements from another team or something like that, it's always good to try to keep as close to the source of that problem as possible. It's sort of like the whole agile, keep the customer close, where customer means anyone who's going to benefit from your solution. Because a lot gets lost in translation. So if you're curious, you might ask the right questions and come up with a better solution than the person who's presenting the problem thought of. Oh God, I'm going to put my bins out, damn it. So a good example of this one from my work recently is, we run a bank and we have a separate sort of financial crimes department, and they said, oh, we need to collect age and postcode on every payment. And we're like, oh, okay, why? Oh, you just need to, it's a requirement, we need it. It's like, why? And after a little bit of engagement, in a nice way, we sort of solicited from them that actually there were some people getting scammed who were tended to be an older demographic, and there were certain postcodes that were more likely to be hit, and they wanted to use it in their sort of metrics for assessing fraud risk. And so that lets us come back and say, well, what if we did something in the app that was like, hey, we can detect that, and actually, you're behind the scenes, you're someone who's older, they're in a risk area, they've got a new payee and they're paying them a large amount for the first time. We could sort of just give them a little refresher on, scams and things like that. And so that would have been something that, the financial crimes people have no sort of opinion on how the customer experience looks, but by sort of pushing back to the reasons behind stuff, we could get there. Read. It's surprisingly rare for me to come across people who enjoy reading books. Even the smartest people I know are like, yeah, I read blog posts, but books are too dry. But there's just so much gold in books. I've found some of the books that I read when I was first starting my software development career to be still relevant. And there's ones that have been around for 30 or 40 years that still describe problems that haven't been solved today, like Mythical Man Month or Peopleware, or even just sort of books like Design Patterns or Refactoring. Some of those ones even introduce like a shared language that if you read these books and then the rest of your team sort of is across what's in these books, you can communicate in a much more efficient way as you sort of talk about, oh, it's going to extract a method and then inline that and then do all these other refactorings where you've got a shared language to do that with. So I recommend it. I don't understand. Every book reader I meet also doesn't understand it, but just books aren't cool these days. But back in my day, that was all there was. But trust is like the oil in a well-oiled machine. So the more you have, the better it is. Everything seems to be so much easier. You don't have to. I guess a good example of it is even in a company where if someone's sick and they don't need to give a sick certificate, or if they need to take leave, no one's sort of saying, oh, have you done all the stuff you need to do, or well, what's going to happen without you? The sort of building the trust within your team, though, is a sort of series of real actionable things that you can do. So one way I find that's a good way to build trust is if someone sets an expectation with you, then just let them either meet it or not. So if someone says to me, oh, this thing will be good to go in 3 days, I'm not going to go to them the next day and say, hey, is it done? And the next day, hey, is it done? Like, I'll give them the opportunity to build that trust. And at my company, we do a few extra things to build trust, which is, some of it's quite interesting. We have a session once a month, first Tuesday of the month. We call it Tomo Time because Grant Thomas, the St Kilda football coach of the early 2000s, is one of our directors. And he gets us doing a thing called Hero Hardship Highlight, where someone will get up in front of the team, and it's all voluntary, it does sound quite intimidating, and sort of talk about a hero in their life, a highlight of their life, and a hardship in their life. And that sort of process of someone really getting it all out, it's a real personal thing. I guess it's not too surprising, but it really does build a lot of trust. Like, it increases the quality of the interactions that you have with each other after that, because you really feel like you've got this shared, it's like you've shared a moment as you've heard people tell such heartfelt stories. So that's interesting. So respect for people's time can sometimes be a reason why people are hesitant to ask for help. But I've found probably the best way to achieve both things, so asking for help and being respectful of people's time, is to sort of bundle up your problem as much as you can into something that's sort of easily digestible before you sort of get someone else involved. And I guess that sort of works both ways, where if someone keeps getting involved, answering your questions, and they notice that you've sort of put no effort into sort of trying to, work out what has and hasn't worked or any sort of pre-work like that, they can also get a little bit frustrated. But if you sort of have, a pre-digested idea of, how the conversation will go, and you're just stuck on a point, you're like, I've tried this, and I can't work out why this doesn't work. And someone can come in and just like hone right onto it. Or if you're trying to communicate with people who make decisions about decisions you want them to make, they don't like thinking, they just like to be told what to do. So this became irrelevant when we wanted more Mac Minis for CI at our office, and people who spend the money are quite busy, so just do the math for them. Okay, so if we get 10 new Mac Minis, it will save a half an hour of dev time every day. We've got, let's just say we have 10 devs, so that's 5 hours every day, and over, if you amortize the cost of a developer at $100 an hour, so you'd be like, okay, after 50 days, it would have saved 25 grand, which just happens to be the price of 10 Mac Minis. We've got room in the server room for them, and there's enough electricity going in there. Hey, boss, do you want to spend 25 grand, get an ROI in 50 days, and have happy developers in the meantime? Oh, yeah, great. So make it happen. I think asking for help can be one of the most constructive ways for you to help the team, because someone who doesn't ask for help is, I guess, it's the same as people that don't point out that they're stuck. They're potentially have to be asked all the time, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? So with someone who is known for asking for help, if they're not asking for help, they're good. And that's a really valuable thing, because then everyone else can sort of just focus on all the things that aren't sort of worrying about that person. I love asking for help. So when I got sort of involved with committing to this, I go to Xavier or Mike Morris at work, who have done this a lot of times. I'm like, fuck, I'm going to give a presentation. How do you do that? What should I put on my slides? Well, actually, that didn't work very well. But yeah, it's a really good way to just get people to help you get better with all of their knowledge that they've got over the years. Be reliable. Now, this is an interesting one, because I think the most important skill in being reliable is being able to say no. So if someone can't say no to a task when they're getting overloaded, or make it clear that they're not going to be able to do it, then they're either going to stop being able to successfully do all the things that they've said they would do, or they're just going to burn out. And both of them are bad. Burning out is probably the worst because some people, once you sort of reach that limit of, okay, I'm overworked, I'm frazzled, I'm burning out, it can be a long pathway back. So say no when you can't 100% commit to doing something, or give a commitment, but give a probability. It's like, hey, look, I don't know really if I'll be able to do this in a week, but I'm 70% sure. And even though you're making up that number, at least it gives the person that you're setting expectations with the knowledge that there's a chance that, there's an uncertainty there. And so when you can say no, people put a lot more stock in your yes. Because a yes, when a no's not possible, isn't really a yes. It's, I'll try my best, but I never know what's going to happen because I can't say no. I guess reliability is all about expectation management. So if it's a really common thing among software developers to be presented with a problem, and it consists of 5 tasks, and each task takes half an hour. So they'll come, 5 tasks, half an hour each, 2.5 hours. It's never going to take 2.5 hours because that assumes that everything goes perfectly, and nothing ever goes perfectly. And so if you set that expectation of 2.5 hours, and then it takes a day or 2 days, for no real fault of your own except for like not setting expectations correctly, you're probably still working as hard as you can and everything else happens, you've sort of not been reliable. So I like to think of the sort of thought experiment of 2 projects exactly the same in every way, except one says to the board of directors, this project's going to take 6 months, and one says to the board of directors it's going to take 12 months. And because they're the same, they both finish in 9 months. The one that takes 6 months is, the one that said 6 months is going to be considered a failure, like it overran its budget and expectations. And the one that said 12 months is going to be considered a great success. It came in like 3 months early. And so I think the trick is to always be conservative with your expectations that you're setting or your estimates. And if the sort of business case or the cost benefit of what you're talking about doesn't stack up after a conservative estimate, then it's probably not worth doing anyway, because most things in technology aren't worth doing in thin margins because there's just so much uncertainty. Share knowledge like this. It's awesome. Like Michael showed, you can just go up onto GitHub and do a PR and you'll be up here within no time at all. Or it could be as simple as just... Sorry? Oh.
Sorry. It was so quick.
Oh.
We should have given you more warning.
Oh, right. No, that wasn't... Oh, no, I wasn't trolling. It could be as simple as sitting with someone, if you get an opportunity to sort of talk through a problem with a colleague, and, that's a great way to share knowledge among the team, or writing documentation. There's always stale documentation anywhere anyone has worked ever, and it's a good way to sort of get things out of your head and write them down, which I always find is quite calming, because the more you hold in your head, the more stressed out you seem to get, and putting it somewhere so that you can forget about it is relaxing. When giving feedback or, talking to people about stuff, I think there's a sort of hierarchy of awesomeness. So there's like face-to-face is the gold standard, and Slack or phone or something is sort of the next level, and then GitHub PRs are not the right place. So I've got a sort of rule of thumb, whereas if there's a comment on a GitHub PR and then another responding comment and you're not in alignment at that point, then it's probably better to just go on to Slack or face-to-face. I mean, open source is obviously an exception, but in an office, it can really quickly get, it's sort of like it's a public sort of debate on a Slack PR, and I used to do it all the time. I was a PR nit, and I have much shame about that nowadays. Yeah, so now I'm very mindful of let's not debate the merits of different design patterns in a PR, but maybe everyone just go with the flow for now, and we can talk about it at like a team code retro or something like that about which way we want to go as a team. And they're also a good way for the team to share their knowledge, like a meeting where like most teams have some sort of agile sort of bent where there's stand-ups and retros and things like that. What we've found in our office is that the retros just get big because the whole company's involved, and there's like designers and marketing people and all that sort of stuff, and so code discussions aren't necessarily natural there anymore. So you need to carve out a different space to talk about code where most of those other non-technical people aren't around, just to respect that time. And I know a lot about this because I am more humble than you can ever understand. But I think kids and teenagers and every software developer go through a phase where they know everything. And it's funny, it's fascinating when you sort of can observe people going through that phase. My daughter's in that right now where she's like, I'll try to explain something to her and she'll say, I already know, Daddy. And I haven't even told her what I'm talking about. So I think it's important to believe that everyone on your team is better than you at something. You know, it might not necessarily be writing code, but there's something that they're awesome at. So that means that there's something you can learn from everyone. And it might not be obvious what it is sometimes, especially when you might be getting frustrated. But I guess always have an open mind that you don't know everything. I think humility, in my mind, is the opposite of arrogance, where arrogance in my mind means a belief that there's nothing more to learn. So that mindset of there's always something to learn pretty much from every interaction or thing that you ever have, I think is really healthy. And we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So if we use them in proportion, I think you'll learn a lot more. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Does anyone have questions for Chris? Yes.
Sorry, are you okay to take questions?
Of course. I love talking.
Hello? Hello?
I don't think it's on.
What is that?
It's not actually a question. You reminded me of something that my team started doing recently when you were talking about like the sort of, putting things aside to a sort of code retro type thing. And my team were finding exactly the same as you. Like we had PM, like product people and designers and stuff in all of our retros, and they get bored when we're talking about code and they're not interested. So we instituted a half-hour meeting every couple of weeks where we do engineering-only huddle. And we have like a sort of little Trello board and that. And so if you think of something during those 2 weeks, you chuck it on the board and then we can all talk about it as a group. And, it's we found it really, really useful to just all get on the same page about a direction and stuff. And we've I've really, really enjoyed it. I found it really, really helpful. So I just thought I'd mention it in case anyone else wanted to pinch the idea.
A great idea. Highly recommended.
So I'll just yell. That was a great talk. Great talk. I love the points. I was just hoping there'd be a slide at the end with all 10 points on it so I could take a photo and bring it back.
I'll make
Next
a blog,
time.
I'll make a blog post.
Yeah, that'd be
I
great.
actually wrote out heaps of notes for this and I had to condense them into like thoughts and words, and I'm like, actually that's some good content I wrote out. So.
No, they were good points. Awesome. Thank you.
No worries. I'll make a book. Easy money. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris.